Now be recorded.
With that, Steve and Maureen, any feedback on the meeting minutes from July 7th, 14th, and August 4th? I went through them and they looked fine to me.
They look also fine to me.
I'd like to have a little more time to look over July 14th. I don't have any trouble with July 7th and August 4th. On the 14th, I think there's a little bit of confusing language regarding the Conservation Partnership Grant. And also we rescinded an appointment in that meeting, and I think it'd be helpful to just kind of explain why that happened. And then also at that same meeting, we had a discussion regarding our financial policy. I was the nay vote on that, so I thought that maybe we should at least include a little bit of dialogue from the contrarian point of view on that particular article. So if we could just hold July 14th and work on that just a little bit, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%. Why don't we do, that being said, why don't we, if we can get a motion for July 7th and August 4th, I think we'll be in good shape, and then we can make those changes, Steve, for next time.
I'll move to approve the minutes from July 7th and August 4th.
Stephen Metellian, I second the motion.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Unanimous action. Thank you. So next we're going to talk about the EDC and RFP committees. So we put this on the agenda because maybe a month or so ago, almost 2 months at this point, we had talked with the RFP committee about potentially reorganizing and refocusing the RFP committee to more broadly look at downtown and adjusting their charter now that the RFP, at least the proposal or the request had been put together. We wanted to delay that to have a more holistic conversation around the Economic Development Committee and the RFP committee. We felt that that we should look at having two committees and the value. It's a lot of people to focus on. The work for the town, we've got limited volunteers. So anyway, I wanted to invite the chairs of both committees to come to this meeting so that we can have a discussion about whether we combine the two groups, whether we combine the charters, whether we do something separate, or what have you. So I think if we can get a couple of minutes of perspective from Dave Ross from the RFP committee, and then from Eugene Burnett, the chair of the EDC, then that will set us up in a good position, Maureen and Steve, for us to have a conversation and a dialogue about how we want to proceed. So with that, Dave, why don't you go ahead and get started if you don't mind?
Yeah, hi everybody. As most of you know, we submitted or released the RFP in early February. We had a 60-day window on that. We had roughly 40 companies register and download the RFP. We had our return date at the beginning of April, which unfortunately, as we all remember, April was a very challenging time, and we received no responses to our RFP, which was a disappointment. The committee met in early May. We divvied up the list of registrants for the RFP, and we tried to reach out to them. We heard back from a couple of companies. We were looking just to understand, was there a reason why they, after registering and reading the RFP, decided not to apply for it? I think it broke down really into three buckets from those companies we heard back from. The first one was, we originally thought this was a town-owned project, and we were there just to do the work and then pass it back off. We didn't realize we were going to become the owner of the property and have to maintain it and manage it, and that's not our business. They were looking at it as if we were building a school or something, and they would show up, do the work, and then leave. The next group I would say that people fell into were folks that were not general contractors, but either like architectural designers or maybe subcontractors. And they pulled it to kind of get ahead of it, but never ended up partnering with the GC to submit on that. And then the third group we heard from a couple of people was it didn't make economic sense for them. either based on the current timing in the environment or that the project, the way it scoped out, wasn't big enough for them. There wasn't enough meat on the bones that they didn't think they could turn a profit. And if you remember, the RFP was simply for Holy Angels, the arcade building, and the 2 parking lots there. It wasn't the entire downtown. So they expressed that they were interested in the overall project, but that piece of it was just too small for them to get out there. So that's kind of the feedback we're dealing with now in the greater COVID world and potential recession coming forward. There's trying to figure out where we're going to go from here. And we could simply release the RFP again. I don't think the results would be any better in this environment. We didn't have anything come out of it and say, oh, this one thing was a problem, and if you change that, you'll get 6 respondents. So I think there's a little bit of a waiting game, trying to figure out maybe how we tweak it, maybe see if there's other feedback we can get. Do we look at expanding the project? And at the same time, we're a committee of 7, and we've had 3 people on the committee not re-up for next year. So we have an issue there where we're going to have to bring in some new people to try to chase down a project that half of us are going to be familiar with, the other half are going to be new to it. And I don't know, from my personal opinion, if we're going to make a lot of headway in the next 6 months, but I do believe there's other parts of the overall vision that we could be making headway on downtown. And that was originally led this committee to ask if our charge could be expanded beyond just those properties. But, having some shortage on that committee with manpower, there's been limited interest in folks joining that committee. If there's any way we can get more manpower, we could work with another committee, we could combine them. That may be helpful to not only increase our manpower, but also increase what we're focusing on in terms of that entire vision.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Dave. Steve, Maureen, if you don't mind, I'll go right to Jean, and then we can entertain questions after that. Are you guys okay with that?
Yes, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Fine with me.
Thank you, both. Jean, go ahead from an EDC perspective. Appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
From an EDC perspective, I think, the desire to do something downtown hasn't changed in any way. We still see that as the prime candidate for a boost in economic activity or really changing the value proposition for the community in a very real way. We haven't met since, we were told we couldn't meet either virtually or in person. So there hasn't been a lot of discussion internally with regard to lack of response to the RFP. I haven't talked to Dave in quite some time. And just the state of the world being what it is, what I'm seeing in my own personal experience in the real estate development world is that anything with a commercial piece to it is causing people to be very wary. There's lots and lots of activity in the residential area, both multifamily apartments, affordables, everywhere. There's lots of transactions that are occurring. I think it's at this juncture, it's very difficult to predict where we're all headed in terms of economic development and real estate development in particular, with regard to whether people will ever go back to office building work in downtown Boston at the level that they were in the past. And there's a lot of high-level thinking, I think, that's going on about what that means for real estate development in the suburbs. So, what I'm thinking is that we need to be strategically sensitive and do more research as to what's happening in the world before we try to put re-release the RFP. I agree with Dave. There's not much sense in doing it as it stands right now with the responses that we've had in with the feedback that we've got. I do think it makes sense to try and cherry pick potential developers and actually go out and approach people that we may feel are doing projects that are similar to this in other places in the Commonwealth. that's much different than pursuing it, this kind of project from an RFP perspective. As far as, the RFP committee trying to manage this on its own in terms of the redevelopment of downtown, I think we all, Dave and I and others, and on our committee, believe that the project could be bigger in scope, and that by keeping it as small as we did, consistent with the feedback that we got, we were kind of limiting ourselves in terms of possibility. Now with the building behind the Ristine, the Ristine building being gone, some of the visions that were created, the artistic visions that were created in the whole visioning process, seem to take on new possibilities. And I think there's probably things going on with the Thompson property too that may change the world. So it seems premature to try and do anything with the existing RFP the way it is. I don't know what Dave is envisioning, since we haven't discussed it, in terms of what they think they can take on as a newly chartered RFP committee with a broader, with a broader mandate. I do think that there's a lot of opportunity to combine, kind of recombine the EDC and the RFP committee to kind of regalvanize the process and get involved, back to the kind of the strategic thinking stage in terms of where do we go next. And, that could change the way this moves completely. There's no question that something needs to keep on moving in terms of what we do with the church and other town-owned property. We can't just abandon this and say, okay, here's what we learned. Let's revisit this 5 years from now. I think there needs to be a consistent effort and a consistent process and continued information gathering, and we'll get better at it as we go along. This was only the first shot. So as much as I'm disappointed that we didn't have the responses I'd like to see, I think by increasing the scope of the project, we have greater opportunity to have a broader and better vision.
Awesome. Thank you, Gene. Steve, questions or comments, and then Maureen will hand it to you.
I think, as I had said a few months back when this first came to light, I'm in favor, as I was then and as I am now, of really trying to combine the two committees. I just don't feel that there's enough work to be done. If we take the RFP committee and strictly focus on downtown, I think that leaves our EDC with not a lot going on there. And again, it is very uncertain, as Gene mentioned, I believe, what's going to happen, and David even mentioned what's going to happen in the future with regard to a recession or things of that, a slowdown of some type. We just don't know. But I would be in favor of combining the two committees, and then from there, refocusing, and again, to paraphrase, kind of keep the ball rolling. I guess the only question I would throw out there is, given the design standards and given what was originally put forward as a plan, is there any consensus or any discussion about maybe pulling back on some of those requests?
Would you like me to answer?
Yes.
I think it's about Dave.
Gene or Dave, why don't one of you guys answer that? I know Dave's been intimately involved with the RFP side of the equation, so I don't know.
So my perspective, just from the EDC point of view, is that the design standards were critical to the overall vision, and they're integral to kind of delivering what the community wanted in terms of the look and feel of downtown. So I think there has to be some consistency with regard to an approach for downtown development that honors the work that everyone did on the RFP committee and on the visioning, with all the visioning groups. I think, Dave, if you could weigh in on this, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I think I agree with both Gene and Steve. So we didn't hear any feedback that the design standards were the main blocker. I do think it's important that we adhere to that vision that the town meeting approved in last May. But at the same time, I think all of us on the committee are open to, if we receive feedback that As an example, we put in had to be concrete sidewalks and granite curbing downtown. And if the feedback we got was that's the one thing that's causing a problem, and somebody wanted to do brick sidewalk, I think we'd be willing to look at that. But I don't think we can just completely, and I'm not saying that Selectman Matillion is suggesting this, that we throw out the design standards, but I do think being open to revisiting them, and if we get feedback that a section is too cumbersome or burdensome, looking at making a change. But as Gene said, we need to honor what the vision was that the town approved, and part of that spoke to a certain look and feel of our downtown.
Maureen, questions or comments from you?
Well, I would agree that maybe we should combine the two EDC and RFP committee. I would not like to see the design standards thrown out, but maybe with the strategic planning and input from the community, we could work all around that.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think we're on the same page, and it's good that we have representatives from the EDC and the RFP committee here. So I would think that the prudent thing to do at this point is to dissolve the RFP committee. Mr. Ross and Mr. Burnett are both on the EDC, and if we could ask the two of you to, take a step back and look at the vision for not the vision, but the charge or the priorities for a combined EDC RFP committee, or an EDC that includes or brings the downtown area back into scope as a priority. If the two of you can sort of shepherd that and come back to us, in another, 2 weeks, a month, whatever works for you guys, with a new set of priorities, that will help. And we can have that discussion about sort of what the EDC should be focusing on and make sense. But at this point, it probably is right for us to just dissolve the RFP committee. Maureen, Steve, do you guys agree with that process?
Yes.
Yes, I do. And then just for clarification, do we know how many open seats we have right now on the EDC? And I think it was previously mentioned 3 open seats now on the RFP.
Yeah, there's one voting member or voting seat that's vacant on the EDC currently. And so what we'll do,
Brett?
Excuse me?
Hi, I'm sorry, Brett. I'm going to break in here. It's Michelle Antonelli, and I'm currently an alternate or associate member on the EDC. And I asked for the reappointment in that capacity because I was under the impression that everybody was returning. So since everybody did not return and there is an open seat, I would request that my associate or alternate status be made full status.
Yeah, thank you. So what we'll do is we will post that volunteer opportunity and post that role so that we can take applications from Michelle and others that may be interested. And then we can make an appointment to fill that vacant seat. And we can do that potentially if we advertise for that, Derek. As soon as we come out of this meeting, we'll see what kinds of applications we get back. And potentially even the next time we meet, we can review those and make an appointment to fill that seat. Or we could wait until we hear back from the EDC with the new set of priorities to see if there's some kind of a better fit based on those priorities with whoever the folks are or will be that would apply. So with that, I still think we're at a point of just dissolving the RFP committee tonight and then moving forward.
Brett, if I could, just for a second. One thing I want to be careful about, I don't want to lose skilled hands that have been at the table for some time. Some people are present tonight, actually. So whatever we do, if we combine the two groups, the people that have been, working hard on the RFP committee that have continued interest in trying to move the downtown vision forward, we need to figure out a way to encourage them to stay engaged with the EDC in some sort of combined role. It may not be as voting members, but and I don't know what the proper format for that would be. But as I said, I think, they have some skin in the game and we want to keep them engaged if we can.
I couldn't agree more, Gene. I think, oh, go ahead, Maureen, sorry.
I was also on the on the RFP committee and would like to be on the EDC committee.
Okay, great. So we can talk about that in terms of, I don't know that there's currently a seat on the EDC for a Board of Selectmen to be or sit on that committee. So I think we would have to discuss that in terms of how we organize that board. So we just have to have that conversation. Do you guys want to have that conversation now? I don't know that we've had enough time to discuss it.
Brett, the one thing I would say is, if you advertise for this position based maybe on the response you get, the board could look at potentially moving EDC from 5 to 7 members. I wouldn't want to do that if we only have 2 or 3 interested and then we struggle getting quorum and so forth. But if you got a substantial interest from folks, that could be something you could look at. But I think you'd probably better waiting to see,
right,
how many people respond before you create slots that then we can't fill, right?
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think, I totally agree. And Gene, to your point as well, right? Like we know David Brooks had an application into the RFP committee when we were looking at sort of reconstituting that as looking at the downtown area. So we know he's interested. We're very interested in, having the help from folks, including Dave. And I know Catherine Worsham's been very involved with the RFP committee and she may be interested. So I think that the best thing to do at this point is to sort of go through, now that we know that we'll dissolve the RFP committee, we know that the applications should come in for the EDC, and then we can go from there. But I agree, we can't lose people that are interested and that have been part of building the great culture and momentum that we have towards all of what's going on downtown. So I agree, it's a great point, Gene.
Yeah, Brett, if I may just weigh in for a minute. We certainly have options. Yes, I agree. In the short run, we need to dissolve the RFP committee. We do have options. We can increase the number of seats on the EDC, depending on what kind of demand we get. We could also expand the number of associate seats. So we definitely have some options of what we could do there to, again, we don't want to lose talent. And we don't want to lose those people that have put forth, I don't even want to guess, I'll say 100 hours of committee work and, just have them be cast aside. So we definitely don't want to do that. I guess just briefly, Maureen, I would look at it as, and I know you served on that committee, but I would look at it as if we have people outside of the board outside of the Board of Selectmen that want to serve on that committee, in my opinion, I would kind of want to give preferential treatment to those volunteers. And again, I don't want that to come across as, disrespectful towards you or the time you put forth, but I'm just saying as a Board of Selectmen member, I would give preferential treatment to others that have served and try to keep them, involved in our government.
How many are on the board right now, Eugene?
Is it 5, Gene, with 1 associate?
It's I think it's 3 with 1 associate now, right? Steve?
It's a 5-member board. There's 1 associate member. Currently, Michelle's the associate member. There is 1 vacant seat on the EDC currently. Oh, okay, great. So Maureen or Steve, I'll take a motion to dissolve the RFP committee, please.
I would make a motion that we dissolve the RFP committee.
I'll second. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Show that as unanimous action. Next, we have the trust fund commissioner election. We have an application from.
Sorry, Brett, before you move on, could I just ask that the board send a letter of thanks to the members who were on that committee and put all that time in?
100%, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, guys. So the application we have before us is from Deb Tata. So I don't know, Maureen, Steve, if you have any questions. I think we all know Deb, and I would just ask Sandy to let us know what.
Brett, if I may, point of order, if I could just open the Trust Fund Commission meeting before we start, please. All right, with that said, at 7:34, I officially open the Board of Trust Fund Commissioners meeting, which has been duly posted. I am not going to read the disclaimer. Disclaimer is similar to yours, so the meeting, our meeting is open.
Wonderful.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My pleasure. Thank you. Maureen, Steve, do we, or James, Jim, do we have any questions or comments, or how do we want to proceed with taking the vote for Deb?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, before you open up for motions to nominate, I'll just give you a quick little background, how we got here this evening. As you all know, there are 3 members on the trust fund, or were 3 members on the Trust Fund Commission, myself, Bob Fleming, and Ken Glowacki. On June 16th, 2020, we received the resignation from Ken Glowacki. On July 22nd, at our posted meeting of the Trust Fund Commission, we officially accepted the resignation of Ken Glowacki for the position. So subsequently, the position was posted, and on July 28th, we received notifications, a notification, I should say, of an application from Deb Tata, interest on that position. So that has got us to where we are currently.
Great. Thank you for the background. It's important. Any other questions either for Deb or about the process? Otherwise, I believe we do a roll call vote. Jim, do you guys go first, or how does that work?
Open up for nominations, and I will nominate. Then, if there's no other nominations, you'll close the nomination, and then we will make a motion to appoint per the nomination. Then we'll do roll call vote. So
Perfect.
Currently, you just open up for nominations.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's open it up for nominations to the Trust Fund Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I make motion and nominate Deb Tata for the position of member of Trust Fund Commission.
Second.
Any other?
Now you want to go to a discussion or to a vote now?
No,
I guess the only discussion I would have at this point, and Jim or Brett, you would probably have the answer. Deb, I believe, is our only applicant for the role. Is that correct?
That is my belief, yes.
Okay.
And Deb, I believe, again, that you accept the nomination. Deb?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Okay, so why don't we proceed, and is there any other questions or discussion? Otherwise, we'll take a motion.
Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we appoint Deb Tata as a member of the Trust Fund Commission.
Second that motion.
Jim Brochu, aye.
Robert Fleming, aye.
Maureen Grinnell, aye.
Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Show it as unanimous action for the Board of Selectmen. And Jim?
Thank you, Deb. And with no other action, please show at 7:37. I am officially closing the Trust Fund Commission meeting.
Thank you, folks. Nice
Thank
to
you.
see everybody and hear you all.
Was that a motion to adjourn, James? I didn't hear the second on that.
I make a motion to adjourn. I make a motion to adjourn the Trust Fund Commission meeting. Is there a second? Did Bob leave already?
I think.
No,
Everybody
I
signed
was
off.
waiting for Deb to second. I'll second it.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you, Steve.
Well done, Jim. You haven't lost your touch.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks, Bob and Jim, for joining us. We obviously appreciate it. This will be a new beginning for this group, and we look forward to working together. So this is great. Thank you.
I do too. Thank you.
Yep, and Mr. Fleming and Ms. Teta. Ms. Teta, congratulations, and good evening, folks.
We
Thank you,
have
Steve.
next on the agenda, we have an appointment to the library trustees from Sadie Van Buren. So are the library trustees here?
The library trustees are here. I believe we do definitely have a quorum. As far as I can tell from the attendees list, our only member who's not here is Ann O'Brien. Okay. And quickly, again, I need to open the library trustees meeting. So at this time, 7:39, I'm opening the library trustees meeting. And I'll just give as Jim just did, a quick background. There, at the annual meeting or the annual election, there were no candidates listed on the ballot for the open position. There were write-in votes, and there were equal number of write-in votes for 2 write-ins. And as such, there was no election. So the trustees notified the Board of Selectmen so that we could follow this process if there was a vacancy that needed to be filled.
Great. Okay. From a point of order, is this a process where we, similar to what we just did, we take a nomination, we do a roll call vote, and go from there? Yes, I'm seeing head nods.
Yes, that's correct.
Great.
And I believe also that we only have one candidate, and that's Sadie Van Buren.
Okay.
If there are. So I guess I'll start by accepting nominations. Seeing none,
Hi,
then.
I'm sorry. Hi, this is Michelle Antonelli. I would nominate Sadie for the role of the Board of Library Trustees.
We have a
Do we
second?
need a second? Correct?
I second that.
Okay. Great.
Sadie, right? Not Sandy.
Sadie, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Wonderful, and thank you. With that, do we want to have a motion?
I move that we nominate Sadie Van Buren to the Board of Library Trustees.
The motion will be that we appoint her.
Appoint her, excuse me.
Yep, it's okay.
Second, Lori Woden.
Brett, just on a technicality, should our board have a second to that motion as well, I wonder? Derek, is that redundant, or do you think that we should have a second from our board?
No, your board doesn't need to do that. You're just opening up for nominations, and certainly if there were other nominations, you could take those other nominations under consideration as well. But once the nomination is made, and the totality of both boards would then vote on it.
Very good, thanks.
Great. Any discussion?
Can I ask a point of order?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm just curious, maybe Mr. Manager can help me out with this. What is the length of the term for this person? Do they serve until the normal term, or do they serve until the next annual election? That's my only question.
That is a great question for the town clerk. If you give
Derek,
me one,
I can answer that. Derek,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can answer that. Kelly did explain it would just be until the next election, so it would finish out the term. That was the information that she sent to the library trustees.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. That's great.
So the same would apply in the last joint election that you had as well?
Presumably so, yes. Great. With that, any discussion about the motion? All right. We take a roll call vote. Brett Simons, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Stephen Metellian, aye.
Bill Taylor, aye.
Michelle Antonelli, aye.
John Robertson, aye.
Charlotte Carr, aye.
Judith Katz, aye.
Lori Woden, aye.
Debbie Amarelli, aye.
That's everybody.
Wonderful. Unanimous action of both boards. Congratulations and thank you very much, Sadie, for your service. We appreciate the help and your time and energy.
Thank you, everyone.
And then on behalf of the library trustees, I would accept the motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved, Michelle Antonelli.
Second, John Robinson.
All right. Roll call, Charlotte Carr,
Aye.
John Robertson,
Aye.
Judith Katz,
Aye.
Michelle Antonelli,
Michelle Antonelli, aye.
Deb Amarelli,
Aye.
and Lori Woden.
Aye.
That's it. Thank you.
Oh, sure, Bill, make me look bad. You know, nice job. Sure.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate that. Next on the agenda, 4.1 was to review applications to the RFP committee. Given that we've dissolved that committee, we can pass over that. Item 4.2 is to, I don't know where Lily's present is, but I'm in the middle of a meeting. Could you evacuate yourself from the premises? Thank you. So we'll move to item 4.2, discuss town manager proposed changes to the finance department. Derek, if you wouldn't mind giving us background and overview of the public hearing process, the feedback process, the discussions we've had, and any questions that we've had from the public would be great. And then I will hand it to Steve and Maureen for the three of us to have a discussion and a vote. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just flashed on the screen just to bring everyone back to where we started back in June as far as the proposed realignment of the three different finance offices here in town. So just as a reminder, the proposal, as you can see in front of you, is to create a finance director, which would be a part-time position, which is also a joint position of the town accountant. That position would be considered the department head of the finance department. Under his or her leadership would be a reorganization taking the treasurer collector's office and the assessor's office along with the functions of the town accountant's office and bringing them under one unified and centralized organization. And you'll see here to your right, if you can see it over here to your right, that is one area that we did receive some comment during the comment period from a resident that we wanted to try to abide by that individual's request by adding a legend key that outlines the definition of the dotted lines that you see from the town manager and board of assessors office down to the assistant assessor. So certainly you can read that for yourself. That outlines what that relationship is like. As far as the comment period, as you can see here, the notice was posted on July 7th with a closing date of August 14th, bringing it to the attention of the residents in this community that there was a proposal that the Board of Selectmen was considering, and that there would be a comment period for folks to submit questions and recommendations or maybe concerns relative to the proposal. That was posted on the town's website on that date. The town crier then did a follow-up article explaining additionally what the proposal was aiming at. We also sent out this notice via our social media account. Chairman, sorry, Chairman Simus did engage during that period of time with the public via Facebook and other social media platforms when folks asked questions as to what this proposed reorganization meant and what some of the benefits behind this proposed reorganization. During that public comment period, there were 3 inquiries that were made, just asking clarifying questions, which we were able to provide, I believe, appropriate responses for those 3 individuals. One comment was submitted, which is the comment I just referenced in the blue box in the right-hand corner of the last slide. We made that appropriate adjustment per that request. In your meeting packets this evening, you will find that the Finance Committee and the Personnel Board both held public meetings to discuss the proposal and then subsequently submitted letters of support. So that's the comment period. And again, just before I end, I just want to talk a little bit about the benefits of this reorganization. And as you can see here, certainly there are cost savings both in terms of personnel and operations. This is a proposed centralized management structure versus a decentralized structure, which is the current environment in which we work under. The ability to position the financial functions of the town towards long-term financial planning and cost recovery, improvements in technology, cross-training, office support, and opening lines of communications amongst these 3 different offices. Certainly day-to-day support of the departments and boards and committees, which we're kind of weakened right now, and then to identify any possible gaps in performance. I can tell you that we've already started to identify areas of improvement. We have already have recovered costs in our tax title process. And there are a number of other areas that the proposed finance department already have their eye towards that will certainly alleviate the tax burden on our taxpayers in hopes of saving personnel costs, but certainly there will be savings in areas that we have found inefficiencies in how we implement certain offices and possibilities of areas where we can increase our revenue streams by implementing such efficiencies. So in summary, you have before you the proposed reorganization of the 3 finance offices into 1 finance department. And it is my hope that you will accept this recommendation for implementation. Pending any questions, I'll turn it back to the chairman.
Thanks, Derek. I appreciate that. Really just so proud of the work that everybody's done over the past 6 or 8 weeks. I know this was something initially that we wanted to act on in early July, but I felt, and my fellow board members agreed, how important it was to ensure that we gave the public ample opportunity to share feedback, questions, comments, input, and really engage in the dialogue around a change of this type. So I'm very glad that we were able to do that. I'm glad that people engaged. I'm glad we got some feedback. It's great to hear and have the support of the Personnel Board and the Finance Committee. So I look forward to seeing what the vote is. Steve, Maureen, do you have any questions for Derek or any discussion you'd like to have prior to making a motion?
I'm completely in favor of this, and I worked for years under this type of a structure, and the benefits that Derek just listed were very much so when we did the same thing. There's a lot of benefits to it. I find it very, it opens up the communications to all the departments that have to work together. You can't do the finances unless everybody is on board.
Great.
I would like to think the communication was good before. I can't see that it wasn't, but in any event, Derek, when you mention cost savings, this seems like we're giving an awful lot of authority to our accountant, who is no longer going to be just our accountant. So how is that salary going to change? And then how is the town's employment agreement going to change? Right now, I believe it's a one-year appointment as town accountant. Will he be on a professional contract year to year? Will he be, what are those salaried hours going to look like? I mean, because to me, this looks like it's going to be more costly, not cost effective. It seems like we win in year one, we lose big in year 2, 3, and so forth.
So you asked a couple questions there. I'm trying to answer them. So the position that we're referring to will continue to maintain a part-time exempt position, meaning there are no set hours for which that individual will put in. So it could be, if it's a slow week, 1 hour. If it's a long week, could be 100 hours, right? So that's the meaning of an exempt position. There will be a professional contract that will be executed with this individual for a period of 3 years. The proposed increase in salary is approximately $8,000 in that position. We have already have plans to, once this reorganization is fully implemented, our intention would be to eliminate the payroll position and roll that position into the assistant treasurer collector's position, which is approximately, I believe, $6,000 off the top of my head. That money will be put towards to offset the finance director's position as well. And then at the same time, the treasurer collector position is a 40-hour-a-week position, and the anticipation is the assistant treasurer collector position would also be a 40-hour-a-week position. So depending on how the new hires are made, so as we know, we're still waiting for the legislation to pass to go ahead and advertise for a treasurer collector. And so once we identify and appoint that position, then we will be able to go ahead and make any additional personnel changes if necessary based upon the treasurer collector appointment. I can tell you, so that is what happens from the treasurer collector position and beyond is still kind of the unknown, because again, we have to advertise and do the full interview process before we go ahead and make any final decisions. But what I can tell you that already the treasurer collector has identified $5,000 that historically has gone uncollected through the tax title process. They have identified areas in which work was being conducted by certain positions that can be moved over to some of our banks that do this work at no cost to us. So I can guarantee that there will be operational efficiencies and we will have increased revenues. That I do know, because we're already starting to experience that. I can't confirm just yet how the personnel costs are going to roll out, other than knowing that we will reclaim the $6,000 in the payroll position that will be rolled into the assistant treasurer collector's position.
Thank you, Derek. Go ahead, Steve. Other questions or follow-up?
Just kind of a follow-up. I get that payroll clerk, that's going to roll over, but you're saying at the actual accountant's position, that salary is going to move by $8,000. Is that what we're going to see?
Approximately $8,000, yes. Okay. And like I said earlier, the intention was, so the goal is to this reorganization, the goal is to be at minimum net zero, with the hopes of having an overall personnel cost savings. But again, it's that the overall personnel cost savings are difficult to predict right now, like I said, because we still have to advertise for the treasurer collector position, And then depending on what happens there, that'll have a trickle-down effects throughout the organization.
Okay. I mean, I think the only other, I guess I'd say it's more of a statement than a question, is understanding that the treasurer collector's position has those statutory obligations, and understanding that our current accountant has been our accountant for, I would say, at least 7 or 8 years that I can remember. You know, to me, I'm really not in favor. I just see it as it's an increase in expense. I don't really see where that I'm getting that extra value for my tax dollar. And then on top of that, you know, the only thing I don't like is I understand stacking that organizational chart. But at this point, you know, we are putting the assistant assessor's position and the treasurer collector's position under, well, again, I'm just going to call it my town accountant's position. I like those to be equal positions. I just feel that there's a natural check and balance that takes place. And I feel like that it will be lost. Now, so not only are we making a step away from an elected position, but now not only are we taking that as a full-time position, but now we're assigning more authority to that position. And again, I feel like there's a check and balance that is therefore lost.
Our finance director was the town accountant. And that's the way the position should fall, actually.
Maureen, the problem, if I can just stay with this for a minute, Brett.
Yep.
The problem is you're taking a town with a budget that's probably 5, maybe even 6 times our budget and runs a public school district. So it's very hard for me to take, you know, almost anything that Hopkinton does and apply it to what we do in Upton. To me, it just doesn't correlate. You know, they do underrides every 2 or 3 years, and I know Mr. Flaherty will clutch his chest at that notion, but they're underwriting their taxes every 3 to 4 years. You know, we don't look to do that in this town, although we should. But again, there's just so much commercial revenue that comes into a town like Hopkinton. I can understand, absolutely, there's a need for that position in Hopkinton. I wouldn't argue that for a second. But in Upton, I totally disagree. Again,
our commercial revenue, Steve, was 15% of the base. It's all residential. And if you go to other towns that are our size, you will find out they have the same structure.
I checked a half a dozen and I couldn't find one that had a financial director.
Who did you check?
I looked, sorry, go ahead. You can answer that. I don't.
I checked just the local smaller towns such as Mendon and Hopedale, Blackstone, Millville, smaller towns like that.
Go to the same size towns that have a budget like ours.
Those are towns that are very similar to ours in size.
I don't think their budgets are quite as high as ours.
So I would like to, you know, offer, this is something that's been recommended, how many years ago, Derek, was this recommended as a change that was made? It's something that I think is very common amongst, you know, organizations where you're trying to find efficiency, right? So this type of restructuring is less about authority and control, and it's about efficiency and clarity and having a collaborative group of folks working together towards a common goal. I know a lot of times people want to, you know, question the intent of changes like this, but we've got a really strong team of experts managing the financial affairs of the town. This will further solidify those relationships. It will solidify the culture of the organization coming together under Penny's leadership, under Derek's leadership, to make sure that, you know, there's efficiency, there's clarity, there's transparency, and frankly, that there's progress being made in terms of how the town's finances are managed. So I'm with you, Maureen. I don't see this as anything other than a very positive and necessary change. So I'm in full support, and Steve, I'm not sure that we're going to convince you one way or the other. So unless you have other questions or comments, I'll open the floor for a motion. You're on mute.
Yeah, again, the comments really would be really just more along the same lines, which is basically just talking, again, the size of our town with the type of management that we've been instilling over the last 3 years. It's just always more and more management, directors level jobs, part-time town planner, assistant to the town manager. We keep adding, I'm going to call it a layer of fat. And when you go to town meeting and you say, there's nothing we can do about our pension liability, it is what it is. These are the type of things that you're doing that's hurting your pension liability. I understand what you're saying. You feel that it will create efficiencies, but it will increase payroll. Ultimately is what it's going to do. And again, we have the same players, playing the same role for added salary. But again, those are my thoughts. I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Well, we really haven't added a position. We're expanding a position.
Oh boy.
So, the important thing to note is I was, and this is all information that's available on the Division of
Local Services.
Thank you. Division of Local Services. Thank you. You knew I was stumped there. So Division of Local Services, they've got a lot of information, and this was one of the things that solidified it for me, because I know we get a lot of feedback about how we spend our administrative dollars in town hall for the administration of the town in terms of salaries and expenses and overall compensation. And, I think we've all heard and been personally concerned about some of the additional positions, the salaries, the increases, et cetera. So I went to that Division of Local Services website, and there is a tremendous amount of wonderful information. But one of the things it allows you to do is look at towns that are similar, and you'd be surprised it's not Mendon and Blackstone and Uxbridge. It's other towns. So you can set a budget that says, hey, give me all towns that have a budget between 20 and 30 million, a population from 5,000 to 10,000, and various criteria, so that you can sort of match town for town what similar towns are. And it was remarkable to me because Upton, amongst the 10 comparable towns that I looked at, had one of the lowest ratios of cost for administration. So town hall as a part of their budget, we have one of the lowest. So I think it's important to have that context when we think about making these kinds of decisions. I think, when we get tunnel vision, we look at, things that increase year over year, but the reality is that our government is managed very efficiently and effectively. This is a change that you heard Eric talk about it, right? He's not making it up. Like, we're going to end up saving money because of this. It's part of the public record here. So if it doesn't happen, we can hold Eric accountable. But again, I think that we're in a very good position, and that this type of change makes sense. So that's where we are. So again, I don't know if there are other points or different points we want to discuss. Otherwise, Maureen, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to reorganize the town finance functions of the accountant, treasurer, collector, and the assessor under a finance director position.
Stephen Metellian, nay.
You'll have to second it, Brett.
I second that motion.
I'll vote aye. Maureen Dwinell.
Brett Simus, aye.
Stephen Metellian, nay.
Majority action. Thank you. Next up, Chief Bradley has some great news. So with that, Chief, if you're here and can hear us, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you, sir.
Hi. Good evening. On the agenda tonight, you'll see there is the FY21 Support and Incentive Grant for our 911 Regional Communications Center. This year's grant amount will be $239,003. And the way that's broken down is the way we have it right now is approximately $210,000 in wage reimbursement, approximately $12,300 for replacement of 2 mobile data terminals for 2 cruisers in our fleet, and about $15,700 in software. That's for Smart 911 software, and that also provides panic button software for all of our schools in Upton and Hopedale for the regional dispatch. And along with the $239,000 that has been approved, I'm also having discussions with the director of the state 911 to support and fund the second half of our dispatch upgrade, which would be about $75,000 for Hopedale to redo their console and have brand new radio resources so we can communicate with them even more efficiently. And just a note on the wage reimbursement, about $142,000 was figured into this year's budget. So the amount of the grant was higher than anticipated. So much like we saw in FY20, if everything holds true, we should see some increase rollover into free cash from the FY21 budget.
Awesome. This is clearly a wonderful program to be a part of. So thanks for all of your work and helping to maintain this legacy. It's great.
A job well done, Chief.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Great. Any discussion or comments? Otherwise, I'll take a motion.
I move that we accept the 911 incentive grant for $239,003.
Second the motion, Stephen Metellian, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thank you, Chief. Good stuff.
Very good, thank you.
Next item, 4.4, we're going to pass over in favor of a September 2nd shared Board of Health, Board of Selectmen meeting. We're going to talk about, as a reminder, folks, we're going to talk about trash collection, recycling, and now we will add aerial spraying to that agenda as well. Any recognition, Steve and Maureen?
None for me, thank you.
No, I have nothing at this time.
Thank you both. Derek, Town Manager report.
Great. So I have a number of things to discuss this evening. But the first thing I wanted to mention, only because given the current environment, we haven't had the opportunity to have our pinning ceremonies and our promotion ceremonies. And so in the past 2 weeks, we have been able to welcome 2 new police officers, Michael Concaves and Corey Eusta. Both have recently graduated from the academy. They're both conducting their field training as we speak, and will, I'm sure, do a great job in the coming years. As you all know, I had reported about a month ago that Lieutenant Bruce Ravad has recently retired. So again, this is what we have talked about for the last 3 years, that we're going to have a number of police officers retire over a kind of a short 3 to 4 year window. And so we're going to start to have to gain new police officers to take on that role. So Michael and Corey are the 2 newest. And so moving on to public health matters, the Board of Health has reported recently that the COVID-19 cases locally have leveled off. We haven't received an uptick in new cases, although we do get a new case every so often. But so we continue to monitor that. The Board of Health is continuing to work with their public health nurse and other staff to monitor that situation. They are working with the organizers of Heritage Day. As you all know, Governor Baker has decrease the public gathering from 100 participants down to 50 participants. So again, the organizers of Heritage Day are currently planning on Heritage Day, but again, they're going to work with the Board of Health to make sure we follow any and all state guidelines. As you know, there have been 2 occasions in the past 2 weeks where we've had to close Pratt Pond for public bathing due to high levels of E. coli bacteria in the bathing area. So that has raised a lot of questions as to what's going on in Pratt Pond, that we've had to close it so often in such a short time period. So the Board of Health has taken some really strong proactive measures. They're actually sampling around the pond in 5 different locations 3 times per week. They're trying to identify if there's any specific areas where maybe bacteria is entering the pond, so that once we can identify that area, we can then go ahead and mitigate that against any future closings. This may at some point require some additional resources depending on what they find, and we're going to work with them through the fall and the winter months to identify the source, so that next summer we don't have to close the pond, if at all. Moving on to fire, the fire chief did report recently that he was able to acquire over 18,000 various types of face coverings, everything from KN95 masks to surgical masks to face shields, with an additional 200 Tyvek suits. This is all in preparation for a potential second wave this fall with COVID-19, and certainly want to make sure that our force, both fire, police, and other responders, have the proper PPE necessary to be protected. We are working on a program called Permit Pro. Permit Pro is slated to begin October 1st. It's going to start with our code enforcement department. This program is going to allow, in the beginning, electrical, plumbing, and building contractors to file for a permit online, to receive their building permit, return to them online, an online platform. So, again, this is in preparation for a potential town hall closure, depending if things peak again, like they did this past spring. We're going to then, if things go well, we're going to move that same online permitting platforms over to the Board of Health office into the fire department. The intention is that ultimately we'll be able to work remotely with those 3 departments without having to have any break in service with issuing any types of permits throughout the town. The library reported this evening that they continue to stay closed, although they are providing curbside service to any individual who requests such service. And at this time, I believe that they anticipate on staying closed for the near future. The DPW, as you know, has been actively at work. They're currently working this week in Briarwood, Pearl Street, Walnut. Those are the 3 streets that they focus on paving. There have been 2 reports last week with water main breaks. So I want to talk a little bit about those water main breaks, because I know that it's raised a little bit of attention because we had such large breaks in a very short period of time. So the DPW director was able to share a report with me after the last break, and those 2 breaks, they were both on AC pipes, so that's asbestos containing pipes. Both pipes were installed in the 50s. The section that failed on the corner of Nelson and School Street was installed in 1950, and then the most recent section that failed on 140 was installed in 1955. According to our director, those pipes have outlived their life, their useful life, and have become brittle. Asbestos-lined pipes are no longer used in the installation of water mains, mostly because, as you can imagine, asbestos is now considered a hazardous material, although back then this was really considered the best technology back in the 50s. So the DPW, as you know, every year we talk about our capital plan as it relates to water and sewer. And every year, the DPW, they remove AC pipe through our town. At the current, if we were to replace the AC pipe, all the AC pipe that we currently have in town, is projected to cost approximately $6 million. So as you can imagine, that's a high number. Our water enterprise account would not be able to support such a request. So I think it's approximately about 40 miles of pipe in total, which represents about 15% of our water infrastructure. So each year we're going to target specific areas to remove that pipe and replace that pipe with ductile iron pipe. That is the newest technology that's used today. So I just wanted to provide a little background as to what's going on with that. The director does think that the reason why we're experiencing the breaks now is because we've had a lot of fluctuations in the hydraulic pressures of those pipes. And again, because those pipes are old and they're brittle, they aren't able to handle those pressure fluctuations during peak periods. So with theorizing, that's part of the cause of these water main breaks. And then moving on to the town clerk's office, as you all know, early voting season is right ahead of us. It's going to begin this Saturday, August 22nd. It's going to be at Town Hall. The period in which folks can come in to early vote will be from 12 noon to 4 p.m. on Saturday, and then again from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Sunday. We'll continue early voting Monday through Friday, and that early voting will be the pre-COVID town hall hours. So on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, that'll be 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. On Tuesday, that'll be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then we'll wrap up early voting on Friday from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. So that's what I have for my report this evening. I do want to bring one thing to the board's attention. September 1st is the actual election day for the primaries. That would be technically the board's next scheduled meeting. Historically, the board has not met on election day, so we may want to consider moving our scheduled September 1st meeting to a proposed September 8th Board of Selectmen meeting. Pending any questions, I'll turn this back over to the chair.
Thanks, Derek. For the September, when were we slated to meet with the Board of Health?
It's September 2nd on that Wednesday.
That Wednesday. Okay. Yeah. So why don't we just Maureen and Steve, if you guys are available on the 8th, we'll move our next meeting out to the 8th. So we'll meet with the Board of Health on the 2nd, and then meet as a group again on the 8th, if that works.
That works for me.
Yeah, that should be fine. I don't think I have any conflict with that.
Okay. All right.
I can quickly just, before we get away from the manager's report, I just wanted to throw out something before you move on. And I'm not sure if Chief Bradley's still on, but Derek, you had mentioned the pinning ceremony. And I think you mentioned it a few months back because we never had a pinning ceremony for Sergeant Benjamin. So now here's 3 officers that are kind of waiting on that day, and it's pretty important in that career field. It's kind of a celebratory event. So I wonder what we may be able to do as a board. And Derek, I see Chief Bradley's back on. I don't know if we could do that, maybe in town hall as opposed to upstairs at Little Town Hall, so we could practice some form of social distancing. And again, since you're back on, Chief, I'll ask you your thoughts on that. And do you want to just delay, or is that something you'd like to address?
It's certainly something I would like to move forward on if the board's comfortable with doing that, either in person in a larger venue, or if we want to try doing it remotely, perhaps just with the town clerk and the board and the new members of the department and the ones being promoted.
I think it's a great idea. I certainly would, as long as we can follow whatever the state and CDC guidelines are, I know everybody would be on board with needing to do that. I think if we can do something in person and find a way to make that work, that it's absolutely well worthwhile, and we should try to do that, whether it's indoors or outdoors, whatever makes the most sense. Chief, I would, maybe leave it to you and Derek and come up with something. I think we would all absolutely support and want to do that for folks in the department.
Great. So I'll work with the town manager to see what we can come up with. And I anticipate, another 2 replacements coming up in the near future too. So that would be great.
Awesome. Good call out, Steve.
Yeah, I didn't want to let that get too far ahead of us. And we have the weather in our favor now. I feel in COVID cases are low. So if we've got a little bit of a soft spot in the schedule, even early part of September, outdoors, indoors, I would prefer to do it in person myself.
Totally agree.
I like to at least shake the ladies and gentlemen's hand and congratulate them on their accomplishment.
Great.
I usually give them a little gruff if I can.
Any other questions or comments from Derek's update?
I guess I was just going to ask quickly regarding the closure of Pratt Pond. What's the status of it at this point in time?
Currently, the pond is open and the Kids at Play continues. And so we're going to continue to keep it open as long as possible, assuming the weather holds up and the bacteria levels stay low. But it's been a challenge. The levels were at some points extremely high, probably some of the highest in the quarter in the most recent past.
I was there yesterday with my daughter. The beach had just been raked. It was looking great. The dock was out. The children were playing, and we walked around in the water, and it was beautiful. So hopefully it stays that way. Any other questions for Derek? With that, I don't think items 7 or 8 are relevant unless either Maureen or Steve have new business, and if not, but I'll ask. We will open it up to public comment, but any new business, Maureen or Steve?
None for me.
Just something I wanted to mention. I have several customers that are elderly folks in town, and one had made mention about a new senior van that I guess there's been talk about it over the last few years. I think it was to be bought on behalf of the town. So I don't know, Derek, if you could maybe look into that and just let us post it on a timetable if that's still in play, if that's years down the road or weeks down the road. But from what I was told, there's some trouble with the current Council of Aging van, and residents aren't able to get to where they need to get. So just wanted to see if that's something we could go offline.
Give me 1 second. I want to respond to that. Certainly. So the van is actively being used. In fact, I saw it traveling past Town Hall last Friday morning when I was meeting with Jim, this COA director. The van did have some problems over the winter. There was a problem with heating inside the van. That has since been fixed. But as we all know, this van is definitely beyond its useful life. We have funding that has been set aside from a local developer, I believe is where the money came from. So we certainly have resources available to acquire a new van. I think right now it just really comes down to timing. When is the most appropriate time to replace this van? And given the COVID environment, we weren't pursuing it just as of yet. But certainly I'll follow up with Janice to see if the timing should happen sooner rather than later.
Very good. Thank you.
Just one question, Brett.
Of course.
Were we doing anything with the upcoming meeting agenda items, the draft?
We It's on the website. I don't think it's changed since the last time we looked at it. So unless there's something in there that you want to switch up.
On that September 15th all boards meeting for strategic planning,
Yeah.
is that still a go?
What does it say? I don't think we have that scheduled. I think, Derek, we were going to follow up with some of the other boards to find a time that worked.
Right. We were aiming for mid-September to do that. I think when we say all boards, we have a lot of boards in this community. So I think it really comes down to are we inviting all of the boards? Or are we going to kind of focus our work specifically around certain topic areas?
And I think that originally had come out of the EDC. So my thinking was that part of the restructuring of the RFP committee and the EDC and having the EDC come back with some priorities would be a precursor to having that meeting with additional boards. But Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, if I've got some of that wrong.
The original request was signed by Dave Ross at the time was the chair of the RFP committee, Jean Burnett, chair of EDC, and Don Spargo, the chairman of the Historic Commission. So that was exactly the point, that there was a lot of things that were happening in the community, and we were hoping to bring everyone together. Now, we also did talk about at some point maybe doing it on a Saturday so that we can really have some intense dialogue. But again, at the time, I think when we discussed this last, going back to mid-June, we were not exactly certain what the fall would bring and whether or not there'd be some loosening of restrictions that would allow us the opportunity to hold that all boards meeting in person. It may get an all boards meeting virtual, may be tough to manage. We have a lot of committee members.
I was thinking that all boards meeting would be on the budget process planning and getting everybody together to, look at how the process goes, and down on the bottom there, the level funded budget versus level service budget. I thought we could, give people a one-on-one on finances and how the budget process works. Did we not talk about that?
We absolutely did talk about having the budget conversation early this year, late summer, very early fall, to, like you just outlined, Maureen, everything from level service budget to going over trends of past operating budgets, and then looking towards what FY22 will bring as far as revenues and operating costs. So yeah, we did absolutely have the conversation.
So why don't we put that one on the, so I guess two questions, Maureen, because I think we need to reinvigorate the conversation or clarify the conversation around the all boards meeting, because I think there's two things, right? One is what I had talked about, which was the original impetus of having the all boards meeting. That's a totally separate thing than what you're talking about, is the budget and the finances and all that. So I absolutely agree on the latter, that we need to do that well ahead of town meeting, so that folks understand the process as best we can.
And I do remember those as two separate conversations. I think the all boards was originally scheduled to really be EDC, RFP, and I think, as Derek mentioned, Historical Commission. But again, the budget dialogue, absolutely, that's something that we should have that as a public discussion.
Yeah. Do you want to schedule that for the 8th or for whatever the second meeting in September will be?
Do you want to have it at a regular meeting, or do you want to have it as a public meeting on a Saturday where we could spend some time going through everything?
Do we think that it's a forum to educate the public or to deliberate amongst ourselves with other boards and obviously the public in a public meeting, but sort of a discussion about goals and objectives, or more of an education for the public?
No, more of an education for us as boards and committees and how the process works.
I would say goals and objectives. I think it's
Well,
so
and the
far
goals
early.
and objectives, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we as the board, right, we've got to kind of set direction. So I think we as a board, and I agree, Brett, as far as the educational side of it, we certainly want to try to include as many people as we can. I just feel like we're on the calendar year, we're, kind of in no man's land, so to say. We're not looking, I guess we're so far away from the annual and a significant amount of time away from the, if we have it, semi-annual town meeting. So I just don't know how much interest we'll get, but absolutely we've got to try.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's critical for us to come together as a board and establish, clarity in whatever perspective or opinion it is we want to share. We should share that as early in the process as possible. Obviously, the budget's derivative of all the work that the finance committee does, all the town departments do, but there isn't any reason we can't share whatever guidance or perspective we may have as a board with those groups.
But I think you had brought up earlier, Steve, that people aren't getting the information early enough at town meeting. Where if we get together as a town, all the boards with everybody's budgets, the trends, just like Derek said, the analysis, level funded versus level services. I think it's a very good education process and early on.
Yep.
Instead of waiting until after December to get all the information on the budget stuff.
Yeah, agreed. So there's a few things in there. So why don't we, take this as a takeaway, Derek, you and I, and we can all talk through Derek and figure out what the best approach is. Because I think, what we don't want to do is I don't want to show up at another town meeting, and I said this to somebody, I forget who it was, and have people stand up and say that they don't feel like there's been transparency in everything that the board is doing, and that town government is doing. I mean, we've been working extraordinarily hard in communicating everything that's going on out publicly, having public hearings, having comment periods. So I think it's critical that we maintain that momentum. So Derek, you and I can sort of talk offline and figure out what the best way to get after, because there's a few things we were talking about in here, the best way to get after each one of them, because there may be a couple of different approaches we can come up with. That's a great call, Maureen. Anything else before we open it up?
Nothing for me.
Oh, I have nothing else.
Great. So we'll open it up for any public comment. This is a period where we solicit any feedback or perspective or comments from the public, and there is usually we don't have any comments, but if we do, we'll limit them to 5 minutes or so each. So with that, any comments?
Brett?
Yes, Mr. Flaherty.
I just wanted to go back to, your earlier comments a few immediately past here that, you want to open it up to transparency and get people involved and all that. And I admire you for the position that you took on this financial director position, where you threw it out there and gave people the opportunity to comment and all that. But I think other than the Finance Committee and the Personnel Board, did you get 2 comments? I keep coming back to the point that, people really don't want to get involved, or they really don't care. Okay. There was a big discussion, and you went out of your way to ask for public comment or public involvement in this process of going forward to this financial position director. But you didn't get anything. You really didn't get anywhere with the public as far as that goes. That's my opinion anyway. So.
Thank you, sir. That's what this time is for. Any other public comments?
Just one.
Yeah.
Paul's comment. I don't think it, Paul, that it's that they don't care. I think they think we're doing a good job. Or else
I'd like
they,
to, I'd like to think that.
well, they'd be on the horn, wouldn't they? If we weren't.
I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
Brett, can I comment a little bit on that too?
Yes, Dave, public comment. Yes, of course. Let me
Yeah.
reset. Go ahead,
And
Dave.
actually, I was going to say something similar to what Maureen has just said. I think the thing we all have to remember, especially those of us who sometimes try to hearken to a different time, which wasn't necessarily better, just different, okay? I think that people in general are much busier with a lot of things than, like, people don't have jobs in the same town anymore. That's been a long time. And people are doing a lot of things, and they're not necessarily things involved with the town in a more formal basis, but they are doing a lot of things. And I do think they care. And I think that, like Maureen has said, if there were major problems, yes, we'd hear about it. But also, I think it's that they do care. And they, in a general sense, feel as if things are going well. And if they're not, they'll certainly let us know. But I really think it's got more to do with everyone's got so many things to do. And I think that's got a lot to really do with it. And those of us that can be involved with town government, wonderful that we can do that. But not everybody can. And it would be great if more people could be involved, if more people could come to meetings. I get that. But it's a tricky balance that everyone has to have. And everyone's got everything they have to deal with, whatever that happens to be. So that's just sort of my general comment. I do think people care. So yes.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think that regardless, I will never stop giving our public and our constituents and our friends and neighbors the opportunity to engage, participate, and be involved with the decisions happening within their local government. You know, I understand that over years we can become apathetic around what people's level of interest is. But I think that as a board and as a group and as community members and folks that have family and friends in this town, we owe it to them to do everything we can to give them every opportunity to participate in and engage in the process. And so certainly, as long as I'm involved with local government, that's what we'll strive to do. Any other public comments?
Just throw out something real quick, and it kind of, I think it touches really on what everybody has always already touched upon, but I'm just going to throw a little different spin. I think that people find government confusing, and the whole makeup of town government, maybe it's motions, maybe it's budget presentations, maybe it's warrant articles, whatever those things may be. And there's a little period of time that it takes to learn. And I think people do care in general. They do care because they'll come out in great numbers when there's something of importance that obviously they find interesting. But I find that, you know, and again, we've always tried to break things down and I've always tried anyways, to try to get maybe a little better explanation on some things. I think we do a good job as a board of deliberating, talk about a lot of different ideas, even though maybe a lot of people don't listen. Maybe people don't tune into these meetings. But I think that we break things down and we do beat up topics pretty good. But I feel like in general, government's a little bit tricky and it takes people a little while to get comfortable and really understand it. It's almost like a second language sometimes with regard to the actions of town meeting or, you know, reading through the budget or things of that nature. So again, I think it's a little bit, in general, I feel like we have momentum. But of course, we didn't have a good turnout at our last annual town meeting, but there were lots of reasons for that. But again, I feel people care, and I'll piggyback onto what you said, Maureen. I think people think we're doing a good job. So I guess we'll all take credit for that. We'll take comfort in that.
Yeah, comfort, exactly.
No credit.
We'll assume the best of people. So wonderful. Any other public comments out there? Okay, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I got that, Maureen, for you. I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting. Stephen Mattelli and I.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thanks, folks. Have a wonderful night.
Maureen, we let
Thank
you
you, everybody.
there.
Thanks.
Huh?
Aye.
Bye.
Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you very much.
Good night, Dave. Good night,
Good
Sandy.
night.